The big table.
Hi, Stephen.
Good morning.
How are you?
Just fine, but that was my dad. And, but believe it or not, I still am a senator for a few more weeks, and am enjoying it very much because I can talk about all these good ideas and not have to worry about trying to get them through the Senate. So it's all right. I came here to, and first of all, I want to thank you for your time and allowing me to speak. And I do want to be brief because I can be otherwise at times. I wanted to, first of all, commend you on your legislative priorities. You have one called staffing and costs. And to me, I think the recommendation I believe is there is a real critical one. Just for a little disclosure so you won't think I'm working against you or behind your back or trying to defeat something, I have been having conversations with a number of people who are candidates for state and legislative positions about schools and costs. And I have chosen not to talk about the revenue side and the tax side. I think I have some understandings about it, but I think I may be a little simplistic and maybe my ideas would never get traction. But I do think I have somewhat of a grasp on the cost side. And I originally was going to wait until after the election because some of the people I'm talking with, we have some tentative dates to talk about some issues. But I decided since you were in Winooski and it's just next down the street, I'd come today. But I would really encourage you to make that issue a real priority because I think the costs is where we're going to probably have the most success if we're going to address the things that I'm hearing on the street. In my businesses, I talk to a lot of people who I call good Vermonters who are blue-collar workers, and they talk about costs. They don't talk much. They talk about their property tax bill right now because most of them are getting them in October and November in our area. But it's about costs. It's about costs. It's about staffing. So anything that you can do to make that happen is great. I see you had noted maybe you would have a study of these issues. I would encourage you, if you do that, to consider putting together a committee that would include business people, as well as maybe some people who have worked in the field of education extensively. Because many, many years ago when I was a superintendent, in a couple of places where I worked, we had like advisory committees as we were building the budget that would look at issues with a different pair of eyes. And they many times were business people or small business owners or interested citizens. So I want to commend you. To me, that would be the #1 priority if I was involved with setting legislative priorities. The second issue I want to talk about is school quality standards, or whatever educational quality standards that were passed here recently. I want to commend everybody who worked on that. I think that's an excellent, excellent document. Interestingly enough, and you probably know this, we were lobbied in the legislature to go over and tell you how to improve it by certain groups who didn't think that they were treated fairly. And in fact, I want to commend Jill. I know Jill's not here today, but hopefully she's still with the agency because I had some meetings with Jill and other people, and I came to the conclusion you'd done a fine job and we did not need to interfere. And the chair at that time thought probably I had as good a grasp of it as anybody, and so we didn't go anywhere with it. But I want to commend you. But I would like to share with you something that I think needs to happen. And I think a lot about education. In fact, one of the reasons I'm not going back to the legislature, transportation, it's fun to talk about airports and it's fun to talk about healthcare, but education at this point in my life is the thing I enjoy the most. When I was a new superintendent, and I was quite young, I thought, maybe not in years, but in experience, I stumbled across something that helped me immensely. It was called public school approval. I don't know if you've ever heard of public school approval. I was an assistant superintendent in Newfane area, and I was on a team and I visited some small Vermont schools. And the interchange I saw going on there was tremendous. So I become superintendent in Fairfax, and the first year I'm meeting with a group of faculty and administrators, and they said, what are your plans for the New England accreditation visit? What do you have in the budget? My predecessor knew that was coming, but had chosen not to budget any money for it. So I'm thinking, well, this is a good way to start. Another unfunded mandate, but no, it wasn't a mandate at all. It was a voluntary thing. But at that time, the Department of Education was looking for, I'd call them guinea pigs. And there was a lady named Alice Agnew who was at People's Academy, a very well-known superintendent. And she was more involved in the PSA than I was. So they asked for volunteers. And I didn't have to do a lot of convincing, but I did convince the faculty at Fairfax that we shouldn't be only looking at the high school with the New England accreditation, because your high schools usually aren't a whole lot better than the elementary and, at that time, junior high, but now middle schools. So we did a combination. I don't know if I'd do it again, but I think I would. So we had a PSA team and a New England team in the building at the same time. What I want to tell you is many of our teachers for years maintained contact with the people on the PSA teams. It's a good networking and good dialogue. And many of our teachers saw how valuable it was to talk with a teacher from Wilmington or Winooski or wherever, that they wanted to be on the teams. And there were times when the principals were saying to me, we're sending everybody off to other schools. Well, we didn't send everybody, but we sent a lot of our teachers. And I can tell you that a number of really good ideas came back to our school district because we had people serving on PSA teams. So as good a work as the agency is doing and the state board, I would really encourage you to look at this whole model that was very popular in the 80s, maybe late 70s, but 80s. Bill, you were very aware of it, and see if there's some way that the agency can kind of reinstitute that. And again, I might change the composition of the team if I had that power, because it was pretty much all educators, if I remember. I think it would be good to have maybe some retired educators, but also some business people. And when I say business people, I don't mean just people that run business, work in businesses, but people who have a little different approach or maybe see things a little differently. So those are the things that I came to talk to you about. I've told Vaughn I'm working on some governance ideas and other things. I'm having fun, and may not amount to anything, but at least it's fun. And in closing, I shared with Mark at the break that the whole early ed legislation that you're dealing with, I think he's very accurate, and I know a lot of struggles. But it was the politics that got us where we are, in my mind. The House passed this a year ago, in May of 2013, and the Senate was supposed to pass it, and the Senate Education passed it. And it languished in appropriations, even though Finance and Education unanimously approved it. It languished in appropriations until there was discussion in the Pro Tem's office, which led to a very close vote. And as I told Mark, I would not have changed one word in that document, even though we knew there were some problems, because one word could have lost us the vote in the political process. So sometime, I think Stacy's right on as you talk to second. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me some time.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you. I'm glad to hear you're still education-minded. Are there other members of the public that wish to be heard? Not seeing any, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Sean Marie. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The consent agenda has been approved.
Who was the no?
Me, Sean Marie,
Who made the motion?
I just, and I seconded it.
And we'll save the conversation till lunchtime. Board members' announcements. Sean Marie.
I was at the Vermont Standards Board in beginning of October, and a few months ago, one of our students were there, and I think that they felt that maybe we weren't as well informed about what's happening at the Standards Board. So I'm just making sure that everyone knows that I have been attending, and that they're working on their action plan for 2014 to 2017. There was report that, or it was reported from, I'm not sure which committee now that the relicensing committee, that the self-assessment is now part of the process for recertification, that there's public comments right now on the endorsements for the revisions of dance and theater, and the undergrad for both Castleton, many education programs were approved, and also for Norwich. There were 2 executive sessions on which I did not attend, on requests for exemption from the praxis on one, which later in public session was denied, and another, a waiver from, for the next couple months while something was being done, was approved for certification. And that's my report from the Standards Board. I do hear anecdotally that when this conversation around pre-K is happening, there's comments about licensing for pre-K certification, that the comments are there seems to be a void, and I directed them towards the agency and the Standards Board. That was not something that the State Board was part of. And then I'm going to pass on my VSBA attendance in Brandon to either Bill or Mark, because they were both there.
Did they explain what the void was?
That there weren't enough licensed pre-K or early ed, special ed teachers for the legislation, which is, well, I have a question for Karen Edwards later. In the current scheme, you can, as a supervisory union, provide a licensed teacher for part of the sort of monetary exchange that happens, and it's not actually in the rules, that part of the $3,000, whether or not it can be, if you can provide a licensed teacher.
It's in the guidance. What?
It's not in the rules. So those were some of the questions
So
that came up.
that's something that has to be reconciled.
So, so I'll defer to either of them for the VSBA piece.
Bill?
A question for Sean Marie. If the licensing board people felt that we were not being informed properly, that means that they must have something that they think we should be properly informed about.
No. I'll throw Dylan under the bus. Dylan went a few months
Dylan,
ago,
defend yourself.
and he didn't think that we knew about the Standards Board. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the State Board is aware of the Standards
And
Board.
I told them, because I was there, I'm like, we know about it, and that's why I'm here, because Sean Marie can't be. But so it was just.
And in that particular meeting, Stephen John had actually asked for a representative from the Standards Board to now come to this board. And I don't see anybody out there, but that was, his intent was to also do the same that we do. So, sorry, Dylan.
Okay.
Bill?
Just a few things. NASB, the Governmental Affairs Committee, is very much cranked up on the privacy issue. 21 states have now have some kind of privacy law. California is probably leading the pack on that, and as we discussed in the legislative agenda, this is something that I think we're going to have to pay attention to, and how this fits in with the great data collection system and the renovations of the data system, I really don't know. But it's a huge issue. I expect federal legislation will be happening on this. That could be good or bad. It's too early to tell, but after the election is over, I do expect something to be happening there that we'll need to be looking at. I did a videotape on assessment with the secretary, and I have received glowing responses from that from the end of one entire person who has
I
commented
didn't get
on
any,
it.
so you must have done it.
Well, I was going to give you some kudos because I saw it yesterday. I thought it was very well done.
That's
It
two.
was at the training, so it was,
So that was a lot of
set
fun.
a nice context for what came after. That's another story.
Okay, that sounds like a lunch conversation,
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Lake Moria is coming up at the end of the month, I believe.
Yes.
And that was, I know that I've generally attended, the chair has attended, and others have attended at least for part of that, and it's a good thing to do. I
What are the
think
dates
that-
of that? This is the,
Halloween.
30th and 31st.
sorry?
30th, 31st. Thursday, Friday.
Costumes required.
But if you don't tell Stephen, you won't get lunch.
I don't like Halloween.
Okay.
So this is the Vermont School Boards Association.
And superintendents.
Did we all get invites to that, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You did? I don't think so.
I
Should
did.
have, but if you didn't, you consider yourself all invited. Thursday and Friday next week.
Okay, so I should twist your arm for that invitation, huh?
We will get that out to you immediately if you didn't. I'm sorry about that.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
On the regional meetings that has also been sponsored by Stephen and Rebecca, I think many of us have gone to several of the sessions. I understand they varied by the state, and I'll let Mark give the report on the one at Otter Valley.
Right. First of all, it was well attended, and if I remember correctly from a newsletter that came out, is these regional meetings were some of the best, if not the most, well-attended meetings that they've had. The VSBA's had. So kudos to the VSBA and for the involvement with the Agency of Education, specifically Rebecca, because the information that was provided was it was informative, it was timely, and it wasn't just information sitting there getting information. We had an opportunity to break out into groups and really start to put some troubleshooting ideas out on paper, and I can't wait to see some of the results of that. So thanks for those organizations for doing that. I can tell you, coming back to our SU and having a meeting with board members, all the board members felt it was very helpful, and I can say over the last 3 years, some of these meetings are really becoming helpful because the information that's being shared is really timely, and as much as, you know, we as board members on the local level are, you know, we get a lot of information. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it's pertinent to us at the time, but it may creep into our districts a few years later and so forth. And so it's a lot of information that has to go out to a lot of different board members, and these regional meetings are important to bring folks together. It was well attended. It was very informative, and I'm glad it was there.
Are you done, Bill?
I'd like to ask a follow-up question, and I see Krista wants to jump in on this one too. I've heard positive comments about people beginning to understand the inexorable arithmetic of the state aid system and how you step down, and eventually this thing's going to catch you if you've been living off of maximum loss provisions. Do you think that the message got through across the state?
I think it was different in different areas, and I think it was more, I felt the last 2 sessions, people were grappling more intensely with the issue. So I think that there's a learning curve going out there. What we have seen, if there was a takeaway that I hope the public got, it's that every district has a challenge. That the challenges are different in different districts, but it's inescapable that we all have challenges and that we are all in this together. We have a statewide funding system, so no one is in a position to say this doesn't affect me and I can't be part of this conversation. And I hear more people voicing that. I can tell you that recently we are seeing more, I am getting more emails, and we are having more districts reach out to us to talk about what some of their options are. So I do, just based on pure email volume and contacts of people like Vaughn and Bill, I think there is an increasing realization in the field that that some of our fiscal perspectives are not good, and people need to start making adjustments now intentionally, or they will be made for them by default in ways that may not be so good for kids or for local governance. So we are seeing a change in the conversation.
Yes, Krista.
I also attended the meeting in Milton, and I thought it was very powerful, great data. The one thing I thought was missing were educators. And that's the missing piece, that you have board members, but the educators weren't in the room. And I went back and took my packet and told my coworkers, okay, this is what I went through, and they looked at them and they're like, this is great. So it would have been great to actually bridge those two together and open that door and have another voice in the conversation, and just to see that data also, because it's not trickling down. And so as much as we'll talk about it here, it goes to the superintendent level or it goes to the school boards, it doesn't trickle down to the field. And I think that's a missing opportunity.
Yeah, and just to be really clear, this was an event hosted by the Vermont School Boards for Vermont School Board members. So the target audience wasn't intended to be teachers because they convened it for their own members. But I have been using some of this data in forums where there have been educators, and certainly I'm happy to share it with anyone who wants to invite me.
Yeah,
to
and that was
share that data.
powerful.
Okay.
I think just more people need your message.
Yep.
Jean Marie?
You know, it's interesting you would say that about the educators, because even at the one that I attended, I'm no longer a local school board member. It was pretty clear they didn't want non-school board members in the groups. And so I was like, oh, good. I can go have a conversation outside of those groups. So I think that that was part of the, if they had been invited or come, they wouldn't have been necessarily part of the conversation. One thing, what I would suggest is any of the state board members that didn't go, if Steve or Carrie could get the booklet to them, because it's half school boards and half from the agency's perspective. So if you, I don't know who went and who didn't go, but the information is really, it's a copy of a PowerPoint. One of the things that I would just like to share, in the book there was a overall Vermont public schools and historic academies have comparable performance, and this graph is there, and it shows the kneecap scores in math and reading pretty similar. What's not in this graph is maybe the demographics and the special ed in both these categories. So, for someone who's trying to look at all the data, I would love to see the data across in those other areas as well, because you're only comparing them to the 4 current.
I'm only comparing to the 4 historical
Right.
academies. We don't have accurate test data for any of
Right, and that's one of the slides about the test data. But if you were to show the demographics and the special ed, you would know those in those 4 academies and the average in the Vermont high schools, right? Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Yes.
So Steve and I attended the meeting in the Northeast Kingdom, and as with the others, it was really well attended. And I think the data picture presented was stronger than the data picture presented last spring when when the first round of meetings happened. And I think that it's improving. And I really appreciated Rebecca's how you articulated that we're all in this together. It's not just some places, it's everywhere, and that the agency wants to work in partnership with places. So I think people will be beginning to feel, oh, this is not something out of our control, this is something we can act on, and we need your help to do that. So I'm glad to hear that they're communicating with you, and that there's boards who are looking at the issue differently from the way they looked at it last year.
I think we've also seen a couple boards who've reached out to us because they need help analyzing their own financial data. They don't have the capacity in-house, and so we'll try to respond to that. And another thing I just wanted to point out, I'm really grateful to the VSBA for making this opportunity available to us. I think we ended up speaking with almost 600 different board members around the state. It really honed my understanding of some of the unique challenges that boards are facing. And what I would say is that there is no the challenges are so different depending where people are and how they're situated, though everybody needs to act. And I guess what I think is really powerful is because the boards did have a chance to sit down and actually discuss what some of the options were, what we have now is this rich set of data about what are some of those possible steps moving forward. And some of them are things that we've heard before, but they've been articulated by school board members now, so I think that has a different power. And we have another session coming up. It's the Appreciative Inquiry session sponsored by the Vermont Business Roundtable. And one of the things that we're proposing to do is do a similar roundup of some of the data, the situational analysis, but then begin the conversation with some of the recommendations coming out of the VSBA, so that the conversation is really grounded in the knowledge and experience and recommendations of the group that is most intensely grappling with some of these challenges around cost right now. I hope I'm not speaking too much, but I just think it was an incredibly rich set of data that came out of those conversations.
Dylan.
So I didn't get to attend one of those meetings, but I would love to get one of those packets.
Right, and I think the VSBA already has a digital version, and
Would you
we'll
put me
put
on
together
that
a
list
digital
too,
version as
Steve?
well.
Great.
We'll give it to everybody.
Along with my invitation.
I'll get mine out.
I think maybe just to echo what Chris just said, I was not at those meetings, so I can't comment specifically on the meeting, but I think hearing the refrain, we're all in this together, and given, not to call South Burlington out, but given the incredible tension the last few days between South Burlington, between teachers and school board, if if those meetings were not the right meetings to have everybody there, which I can see why you would have an affinity group just with the school boards who are grappling with separate issues, could there be a structure, what's the next step that then does include the teachers? Because I think if we are all really in this together, then the teachers have to be a part of that conversation.
think
So
it's-
is it moving it to the NEA, then hosting those same informational meetings, or what's the next level of that?
I'm happy to do that. I actually offered Martha to share the slide deck with the NEA. It's not going to happen tonight. Maybe there'll be another occasion in which they'll invite me to share some of that information. Be thrilled to work it that way. I have shared it with superintendents in some forms, and I will continue to share it because they've asked to share it with their staff. So I do know, I want to be really clear. There are leaders in school systems who are already saying exactly what Krista is saying and are already sharing this information with their teachers. I'm happy. I've gone to school districts. I've shared it with groups of educators, and I do believe everyone has to be part of this conversation. And we are, invite us, ask us, we'll share it with you and send it to you.
I hope you didn't think, I certainly didn't mean that in an accusatory, like,
No,
why isn't it?
we've been trying, but
Yeah.
if people don't invite us, we can't.
So,
we can't do
so
it.
that's good to know, so maybe think about how we can help support
Yeah,
that group, I think that's good to know.
Krista?
yeah.
Just speaking of relationships and all together, I mean, all of you know I work at South Burlington and have, been, it's been a difficult week last week, and I just hope we can all work together to prevent that from happening to any other school. Because I think students ask the best question, and I had a student ask yesterday, well, did you win? And I just looked at it, I was like, I don't even know what the contract is, but no one won. There's no winners. Everybody loses when there's a strike. And those relationships are broken. And education is all about relationships. Relationships between the students, between parents, relationships between administrators and staff, relationships between teachers, school boards. And I've seen that tested and broken, and it's a horrible process. And right now, in the community that I work in, it's going to be a long time till those relationships are rebuilt. And I think anything that we can do on this level just to facilitate conversations that include as many players as possible is so helpful. And I just told the student, like, no one won. Everybody loses. And so I do hope that we can work on some sort of solution that how do we prevent this. And if anything else, I know I've reached out to my local union that could we brainstorm a list and strategy and like how to best prevent this from happening to others. Because I don't want to see any other educator, I don't want to see any other community have to go through last week being sworn at, yelled at, things thrown at you in the media, vilified, and that does damage to the education system. And we talk about sustainability, so I guess that has just been something that's been weighing on my mind, is how to best forge really strong, positive relationships on a state level, on a community level, and really, truly, I'd love to reach out to any other school district to prevent what happened, because no one wins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Marie?
I just, sorry, Krista, I mean, I went through the same thing Krista did, only we had a 9-day strike down in Bennington a couple years ago. And Bennington was brought up in the news again in relation to that, so it doesn't go away.
No.
I just wanted to, I'm sure Bill will be attending this webinar from NASB on the assessment cut scores and the relationships to student performance.
As a matter of fact, I'm signed up.
And so it's, anyone can, any one of us can sign up. It's on October 27th. From 2 to 3, and I sort of thought Bill would mention this because he's always right on top of the NASB stuff.
Circulate this?
Well, I was just handing it to Rebecca so she could put it in her pile.
Any other comments from board members?
I have one on a
Okay.
completely different note.
Okay.
Well, maybe two. I did really appreciate your video, the introduction to the SBAC training that I attended yesterday. It really did help set the context in terms of the importance that the testing is, but also the balance that I think that was really helpful for everybody in the room. And the two of you did a great job. You should take your show on the road.
Is it on the website? Is it on the AOE website?
I don't know that it's on the website.
Yeah, but it was nicely done. So and very much appreciated, and I think everybody sort of felt the same way. So thank you. And then the other thing I want to just let people know is October is the month of the young adolescent. And so we've been celebrating that in our building. So on a completely different note, I wanted to share that with you. And yesterday, or last night, at 5:30, I was on the news with one of my students, just so that you know, talking about middle school kids, who I think people don't often appreciate, certainly not the way that I appreciate them. So I want to just go say again that I think they're the best people to work with. So I enjoy them.
This is just really quick, but Dylan and I are currently a part of a dual enrollment communications course called Communicating Through School Redesign Through the Youth Adult Partnership Lens. And it's really great. It's done by Up for Learning, formerly known as YATST, that we were both a part of. And it's really great. I think it's going to help inform our work on the board and vice versa. Really excited about it.
Terrific. Good. Any other comments from board members? If
Got
not,
one follow-up, now that Sean Marie has reminded me of this one, and Rebecca and I have talked about this some too, is the cut score determines how many kids fail or pass the test. And they're having meetings on SBAC as to where to set this cut score. It's really a subjective thing. If you set it low, everybody passes, schools are successful. If you set it high, everybody fails, and all schools fail, and so forth. So it becomes really kind of political. And it's curious that they're scheduling this cutoff score meeting around Halloween and just before the elections. And the question that I don't know the answer to is, are they going to be releasing their so-called cut scores with projections on passing and failing before or after the election? I don't know, but it's something we should pay attention to.
Who's making a decision?
all right, thank you for those board announcements.
I have one.
Okay.
Just one. I was asked to testify not as a state board member, but as someone knowledgeable about extended learning time in rural states at the task force yesterday on extended learning time, and had a great half-an-hour discussion with that group, of which Tom was a member.
Okay. I'll be very brief in my report. I want to remind you that in November, that will be invited to the Vermont Business Roundtable two-day conference, November 17th and 18th, and that our board meeting has been moved to the 19th. So, and we don't know where yet, and we don't know where we do, Burlington?
No, it's going to be at Hazen, Union Hardwick.
Okay, well, that's right. So, one thing we'll have to work out with Perry is if, those of us that are going to be in northern Vermont for 3 days will need probably hotel rooms, so we'll be in touch with you on that. Secondly, very quickly, I need to get back to Brattleboro for a big meeting this afternoon, so I'm leaving after lunch, and Sean Marie will be running the meeting this afternoon.
Yahoo!
Sounds like a party.
You made it very brief. One item.
Secretary's report.
That's a good item.
Well, I will come back to some of the issues that have just been raised, but I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the Teacher of the Year, because we're announcing today, and I see Jill has already beaten me to the punch with her press release. I am absolutely thrilled by this year's Teacher of the Year. In fact, I'm thrilled with all three finalists, because they all brought tremendous skill and tremendous passion and dedication, and they all really epitomize what it is to be a great teacher in Vermont. I'm really thrilled that we are going to be having as our representative, our Teacher of the Year for 2015, Rebecca Haslam, a Champlain Elementary School teacher and District Social Studies and Equity Curriculum Coach for grades K through 5 in the Burlington School District. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have her take this role because not only is she a dedicated and outstanding professional who has figured out how to leverage the diversity in our classrooms as an asset to enrich the learning of all children, which to me is really the core challenge. It's really what it means to be a global citizen and how we work with children from all kinds of backgrounds to ensure that they all thrive and are valued and are able to share their culture and enrich us all with it. But she is also the epitome of the teacher who knows how to work with her colleagues and build their collective efficacy. And I really believe that our challenge in Vermont is not isolating and identifying individual teachers. It's figuring out how we build the professional capital of our schools as a whole. And I think very often really outstanding teachers are in outstanding staff, in part because they work with each other to raise the skill and the understanding and the collective efficacy of all the teachers in that building. And Rebecca, in her work as a coach and as a curriculum coach, has really embodied that and brought skill and insight and professional competence, not just to herself in her own classroom, but to all the faculty. So I'm absolutely thrilled there. Just to give you a little bit of background on her, in addition to team teaching first grade, she helps develop curriculum. She works with teachers in each of the Burlington School District's 6 elementary schools to employ resources that are more inclusive in content, language, and practice. And if you saw the Civil Rights Project recent release, one of the things that they called out about Vermont is that we are at the beginning of a demographic transition that we think is going to bring increased vitality, increased economic prosperity, and certainly connect us with the world outside Vermont. And one of the challenges they threw out to us was to learn from the things that haven't gone so well in other states and take advantage of the opportunity we have to do it right. And seeing Rebecca and hearing about what she's done in her class and what the Burlington schools are trying to do as they work together gives me incredible hope that we in Vermont can really embrace this diversity as an asset and do it right. She has served on the district's Equity Council, and she's taken a strong leadership role in creating professional development sessions for all teachers, pre-K through 12, and those are called equity conversations. And the goal of these is to help move all staff, students, and community members along this continuum of cultural competence. The thought being that we have to educate ourselves to learn how to be socially competent in order to take advantage of the assets that kids bring to the table. And again, what I love about this is it's not about just fitting the kids to the school. It's about figuring out, as educators, what is it we need to learn to take advantage of the richness and diversity in our classroom. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have her take that role and represent us this year, both in-state but also out-of-state nationally. Also recognized were the alternate Christina Norland, an elementary school music teacher and PBIS coach at Edmonds Elementary School, also in the Burlington School District, and another finalist, Alan Crowley, who was a high school English teacher at Missisquoi Valley Union High School. They will all be honored by you at our December meeting, which will take place in Burlington, and we all have a chance to hear from them and see them then. So that's just a great way to start. I think she's such a powerful representative of our teachers and really represents the tremendous passion, dedication, and skill our teachers bring to the job every day. So thrilled to have her take that on.
So this will be done at the December meeting? Is that what you just said?
Right,
Okay.
correct. Another good news note, I need to call out that and it's been great to have the support voice today at this meeting already for extended day and after school programming. There was a new nationwide report that was just released by the After School Alliance, and it ranked Vermont as 4th in the nation for after school programming. And this was a report called America After 3 p.m. It was based on a comprehensive survey commissioned by the After School Alliance, and it highlights the progress Vermont has made over the past decade in providing high-quality after-school programs, but also documenting the need for this kind of high-quality programming in our state. And I can't emphasize, and I know this has come up again and again in this board, just how important these programs are in our communities. First of all, keeping kids safe and keeping them learning after school, but also in supporting families that really need aftercare so that they can continue to work and they can access and support their children in those hours between 3 and 6. And finally, it plays a critical role in closing the opportunity gap. And by opportunity gap, it's not just that they need homework help, but when you think of the kinds of opportunities for play and enrichment and extended learning that we know are so critical to healthy development, that's where a lot of this happens. So it's really exciting to be recognized for that work, and have to thank the Vermont After School Program and also Manuel Betts at the agency for supporting that work. So to pick up on a couple themes that came out and just tell you where they've gone, I know the State Board of Education through Bill had sent out the statement on assessment to all the boards of education across the state, and we have begun to hear back from some of the agencies in response to that. So for example, I had a long conversation with Cindy Hill and was able to joke about the fact that they're the reddest of the red and we're the bluest of the blue, but they shared many of the same concerns around the use of assessment. And I think what's coming out and really coming to the fore, in which we intend to work with CCSSO, on is even if you believed in some of the reliability indicators of some of these tests, it's very clear that they just don't work in small schools, because the whole premise of the test is that you need the reliable test results to audit professional judgments about teacher quality or school quality that are made by professionals. In Vermont, we have the opposite problem. Half of our schools are very small. We need professional judgment to audit the story that's told by the test, or we will come to the wrong conclusion many, many of the time. And so we are working to try to push that conversation and make clear that really we can have federal accountability as sort of our ticket to play, but that's going to get us compliance. It isn't going to get us quality. And what we need to do is develop a sort of this quality assurance model along the lines of what I talked about at Springfield, which really supports and develops the professional capital of our educators, who are the key to making our schools great. And so as we move forward, we're looking for ways to put sort of a menu of options, sort of along the lines of the PSA, but sort of modified to be consistent with the education quality standards, sort of menus of tools that educators can choose and local districts can choose to use to continue this work, and we'll keep pushing that. One element in that I just wanted to call out, because you saw evidence of it, you saw the letters that we sent out to school districts offering grants for SU level teams to join in professional development about proficiency-based graduation. We feel this is a big change. We know school districts can't do this without support. If we hold them accountable and compliant for providing it without providing the support, they won't be able to do it with integrity. So the goal of that was to provide the incentive grant to them, let them choose the educators they want to bring to the table, and invite them to come as teams so that they can work together to develop some good practices that they can use in their own systems. And that has been incredibly successful. We expect to be able to support 30 SUs this year and another 30 next year. So within 2 years, every SU should have had a K through 12 SU-wide team that's been able to participate. And we've been expanding the numbers a little bit in response to demand. There's a very, very high demand for this, which is pleasant to see. And I think it reflects an operational change for the agency in terms of using incentive grants to invest in educators to come and help us develop the solutions, rather than drawing up the solutions at the agency and putting them out in the field and telling them they need to do it. So we'll see how it plays out. We've been really favorably impressed by what some of the teams are bringing to us so far. So that's exciting. In terms of pre-K, we'll have, I think I might hold my comments because I suspect they'll come up in the context of that discussion.
Okay.
Let me see if there's anything else. I think that's most of it.
All right, thank you very much. We're running a bit ahead of schedule. I don't know if other folks from Windsor Northwest are planning on attending, but I would, are other members coming, Meg?
Superintendent Labs was planning on coming.
Okay.
Orange Windsor.
You just flip the order.
Karen Edwards, is Karen Edwards coming after lunch?
Yes,
Rebecca?
yes. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and hopefully everyone will be here, and we'll go back on to Windsor Northwest. The reason I told you I wasn't here this afternoon is if you want me to sign your voucher, you should send them over to me now. On an action item G, Windsor Northwest interim report. And the order of business is I'll ask Vaughn to give us a brief update. Notice I always put the word brief when I talk about Vaughn.
I noticed that.
Really emphasizes that.
It's hard when you know too much, Steve.
I guess.
It is hard.
And then we'll hear from the two superintendents in the area. Vaughn.
The state board directed the superintendents to produce an interim report today, which has been submitted, and I will let the superintendents talk about. My understanding is that, well, Pittsfield is in transition to Windsor Central as the board directed. Of the remaining, all but one have, I believe, officially chosen to go with Superintendent Labs. I believe Bethel is still under discussion, and I will let Superintendent Powden discuss that process. I do want to say a tiny bit in my limited time about the progress that actually has been made. I was invited to attend a joint board meeting in late September, and it was a very positive thing. The boards that had already made their choices, their representatives, and the people in Orange Windsor were excited, I think is honestly the right word, thinking of the things they could do together as a larger community. And I think that both superintendents deserve a great deal of credit for that. This was not an easy circumstance. It's been going on for many, many years. The recent arrivals, and I think it's fair to say that we've probably seen more progress in the last 6 months than in the preceding, I don't even know how many years. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Superintendents Powden and Laps.
I don't think we're, but unless they're going to request it. I don't know. But I'll, for most, accept the report. Good morning. For the record, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Meg Powden, Superintendent of Schools at Windsor Northwest Supervisory Union.
And I'm Bruce Labs, Superintendent of Schools for Orange Windsor Supervisory Union.
We should acknowledge that we received the report in a timely fashion, and thank you for that.
You're welcome.
With that great introduction.
Sure. Well, I would say it's been quite a process, and one I've enjoyed as a new superintendent, and one I sought out because I believe in the consolidation of our supervisory unions and the work that goes along with that. So I will say I'm very respectful of the work of our board members. I think they've had a hard task before them, and they've, I know from the state board's perspective, maybe they've been deliberating too long, but from my perspective, I found the board members, to be genuine and sincere and wanting to do what's right for the students that they're charged with supporting and leading in their respective districts. So you've all had a chance to read the interim report. Do you have any questions?
Why don't you give us an overview of where you are right now?
Sure. So we have 6 districts in Windsor Northwest Supervisory Union. As Vaughn said, Pittsfield is headed to Windsor Central, as you voted on that change in the boundary in June. We have 2 choice towns, Hancock and Granville, that will be going to Orange Windsor. Rochester is also voted to go to Orange Windsor, and Bethel has been exploring the possibility of Orange Southwest and Orange Windsor. Last night we held a board meeting, and Orange Southwest asked for a united board if they wanted to go forward in that exploration, and we don't have a united board in Bethel School District. We have a divided board. Some members are supportive of going to Orange Southwest. However, the majority wants to go to Orange Windsor, and so I think we're headed in that direction. We'll be having our second joint meeting with Orange Windsor on Thursday night. Our merger task force and the Orange Windsor Executive Council will be meeting. We have applied for the grant for the study of the boundary change, and worked with Steve Dale as far as securing a consultant to do that study.
Let me, I guess, also kind of chime in here that since we sat before you in June, and I was somewhat aggressive about saying, let's get on with this, I really didn't have a feeling of what has happened before this. Now I do. And sometimes you have to back off and allow a town, a school district to figure it out. And I think we've remained, and I speak about Orange Windsor, my SU, I think we've remained to be positive and welcoming as much as we possibly can. I've met with the Windsor Northwest Board. But we've tried to let them have time to decide on this. And I think as late as last night, with Bethel trying to figure out what they need to do, want to do, we've let that happen. And I think sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And that's been my temperament. And Meg has been a great partner in this. She's done an awful lot of work. And I felt pretty much like until the other districts made up their mind in Windsor Northwest that we really couldn't move forward together, other than we've been meeting once or twice a week, alternating the sites, and we've met with the boards. And so, I think we're at a place where we can now move forward, and I guess we're looking for some consideration from you as a board to help us in this. We know it's kind of a last minute, last hour time frame for money and that type of thing. And I guess I'm asking for your consideration now that we've, I think, done the heavy lifting getting us to this point. I think we can say we can go together now and get something done. Whereas I've been hesitant, and I think Meg's been kind of nurturing this along as best she could from her SU's perspective. So anyway.
Can you explain, again, I didn't quite get it, where Bethel is in this whole process?
Sure.
Please.
I think it was in late August, we had the understanding that Orange Southwest wasn't an option. And then there were some meetings that occurred from some of the board members in Bethel, or one board member in particular, that met with Brent Kay, Superintendent of Orange Southwest. And that changed the conversation and the possibility of maybe now Orange Southwest was an option. So there's been communications that's happened between Kristen Laframboise, who is our Bethel School Board Chair, and Kristen Husher, who is the Orange Southwest Supervisory Union Board Chair. And there's been some attendance at some planning meetings as well at Orange Southwest. So there, again, it is a divided board. There was that exploration, but I think after the meeting last night, it's pretty clear that the board will not move forward in a cohesive unit towards Orange Southwest, and that's something that Orange Southwest was looking for. Therefore, the decision, from my perspective, means that we'll go forward to Orange Windsor. And they need another month to have another conversation about this. They have a new board member coming on. If you were to ask me what the vote would be today, I would say it would be 3-2 in favor of going with Orange Windsor.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I sat down like 1 minute late. Were we already asked for something? No?
I think Bruce was leading into, it has taken time for me as a new superintendent to get to know my boards and my districts. And you can see in the report the work that we've been engaged in. I think it's been well done, and it's been extensive with each district to be inclusive of all the districts, so everyone had a voice. And so we are late in asking for a study, for that grant to do the study. But I would ask, since we have tried to work with this process with fidelity, and that we would ask for our study to be submitted to you instead of on December 1, closer to mid-January, if the board would choose to.
Sean Marie.
So at our June meeting, we changed the date for the final vote shall remain June 20th, 2015. There was some...
January 20th.
Yeah.
What did I say?
January,
sorry, because we were in June 24th, sorry. So we're, as far as I know, we're planning on voting on this on January 20th.
Right, and we plan on you voting on that day.
And the report we're looking at is the report that was submitted for October.
Right. Just to be clear, so what the action we took in June, we asked for update report on October 1st, and then the final report was due December 1st, 2014.
Correct. So
We
we'd
were
have it.
scheduled to take a vote on what was the final proposal at the January meeting.
Correct.
And what Meg is asked now is that the final report not be submitted, not be due until mid-January, but we would still vote on the plan at our January
Same
meeting.
day. We don't change our vote date.
No, the vote, I haven't heard a request
That's not
for.
what we're asking.
No, we don't want any further extensions.
We just need time with our boards. And there's so very little time between now and the holidays to be able to really do this justice. And we want to do it well. We
Now,
don't want to do a rush job.
I know there's been some confusion over the funding to study this. I gather you have now applied.
Yes.
When does that grant actually, what determines when that grant is issued?
I would discuss it with Bill Talbot. It was submitted the 15th. If he concludes that it's a completed application on that date, even while we're going through the grant administration process, sometimes, I don't want to speak for him authoritatively, but sometimes he would give them permission to start immediately.
Even though the final report had not been filed?
Even though the application will have been filed, it just won't have gone through accounting, it won't have gone through, we're lucky because Bill gets to sign both as the director and the CFO, so in finance, we save a step. And then it goes out to the superintendents for signature and back to us. So what it would do is it would allow them to begin acting as though they have the grant before the application is complete. He's not always able to do that, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it.
I guess what I'm struggling with is what determines a completed application? Are we talking at all about the plan that they're going to be working on between now and the middle of January? Would any of the funds come to them?
They would come, up to $20,000 would come between now and the final date of the grant, the study grant. The other thing to keep in mind, however, is by statute, every dollar that goes to the study grant comes out of the transition grant, $150,000, a piece of which will go to Windsor Central, and I understand they're already engaged in talks over that. So the question is whether they get it in this form or whether they get it as part of the transition grant. And when I hear about, I honestly don't know what would happen is if a month from now Bethel decided that it wanted to make a change. It's hard for me to imagine in the time remaining that you could do a study with a change of that magnitude, because all of the early work, including the agency study, did not include that supervisory union, because it was our understanding, and before us it was Superintendent Plashik's understanding, that there were conditions that the Bethel board found unacceptable. So
You're talking about Orange South?
Right.
Orange Southeast?
Yeah, understand that they're expressing an opinion, not telling you how it's going to be. If you look at maps, it's sort of a linchpin. It would be hard. All along, the hope has been to start moving forward. The sooner the 5 districts are definitely assigned, the sooner they can move full speed ahead. My fear is that this puts the process off several more months. But they can definitely apply for a grant, and they can receive a grant. And I don't know whether it will primarily be working on the questions that Bethel once answered now, or more general questions. At the time, the last time we spoke, my understanding was Bethel would have made a selection by now.
So I'm unclear. It sounds like you're saying that you said, but maybe you could answer this. You're saying that the decision is pretty much made to move
We're
this
ready.
direction?
We're ready to
Then I
go.
would question why you need, what is the purpose then of that grant? Is it
They had
to inform a decision, or is it to start moving forward in terms of how you're
moving
trying?
forward.
Okay,
It's
that's
to
the
fulfill
question I
what the
have.
state board has requested of us, too.
We have facilitators lined up. We have a meeting Thursday night. We need to go through the transition steps in order to be able to be ready for this, and we're ready to go. I don't want anybody at this table to believe that we're not. I mean, yeah, there's some people that have questions, my board too, but they need to get around the table and start talking to each other, and we're not, we haven't been ready to do that yet. I mean, we've done it a little bit, but, and they get along really well, but Meg just needs time with them.
I just have a quick question. You're really not here to ask us, is this accurate? You're not here to ask us anything about the money. You're asking us to, can you have 4 more weeks before you give the final report?
Right.
Right?
If the board still wants a final report, it sounds like might be some discussion about that.
We figure we can get 4 meetings maybe in between now and the holidays, maybe 5. And we're.
What's gonna, I'm not clear what's gonna, it sounds like everyone is in line, ready to go, except Bethel, but yet the leaning of that board
Most
is
of
3 to
Bethel
2 in
is.
favor. What are the issues? Why is Bethel taking so long? Why haven't they come to a conclusion?
They have some distrust, I would say, in the community with the central office and the financial issues they've had to grapple with over the years. And so I think there's some divisiveness within the community. And because of that lack of trust, they're questioning. There are many members of the community questioning, and the board is trying to represent those members well. And so I would say that plays a significant role in why some of the board members are interested in going to Orange Southwest, because Superintendent Kay is held in high regard, and his fiscal responsibility with his districts is an attraction for Bethel School District.
This is what's mentioned on page 6 and 7 of the report.
Mr. Chairman, the thing that frightens me most is the notion that you now have a board split 3-2, but agreeing with the course of the other districts. And the thought of the state board facing a month from now a board split 3-2 in the opposite direction with the facts not having changed just seems to me to be a particularly awkward thing to deal with.
I don't think that will happen.
When you say there's going to be a new board member, we have elections in March. Is there somebody being replaced now?
Yes, there was a board member appointed last night to replace the board member going off.
And then there's an election in March for that same person?
Yes.
For that seat, position.
Is that person going to run?
I don't know that yet.
So Bethel now is split 3 to 2 to join what the other towns are doing, Windsor Northwest?
They haven't taken an official vote, but if that is what I think is the leaning.
Okay. Bill?
I don't know that there's any real action here in one sense, because the decision that I'm hearing is it's either going to go north or south, but it's not going to stay where it is. And we still have the vote in January, and if they're asking for planning money either to reimburse what they're doing or to facilitate going forward, I don't have a real problem with that one either, as long as we hold on to our date.
Well, the one request I've heard is that under the current motion, their final report is due December 1st. And what I think I heard Meg say is that they're requesting that we move that date up for the report to mid-January.
I'm okay with that as long as we don't move our vote date.
They're not asking us to change
That's
our
correct.
date.
That's what we're asking.
We, I'm sure, I won't speak for Vaughn, but I would think, I'm not sure we're of a mood to move it up to January. But I would think if we do go that route, it ought to be January 1st and not the middle of the month, just to give the agency some time and give us some time to be prepared for the vote in January.
That's totally acceptable. We just wanted to push it out as far as we could.
We wanted as much time as you would give us.
Yes.
Because we know we've got a real grueling schedule ahead of us.
The more time you have, the more likely you will reach a successful conclusion, seems to be what you're inferring. If it's pushed, it's likely to fall apart. Is that accurate?
I don't think it'll fall apart, but I think
no.
we'll have a study that's not as complete as we would like.
Okay.
I guess.
I'd have to point out that you were asked right after the in the June meeting to consider applying for the grant, and so the fact that we're even talking about the grant now is because that request was never made. What is it that's changed that you feel that you're going to be able to act on this moving forward in a way that's different from after the last time the board discussed
there was a
this?
misunderstanding about the grant request, and as I looked at my work going forward, I wanted to get to know my regional super colleagues in the region and learn about how they had worked with this issue in the past. I wanted to get to know my boards and what they have been discussing and their desires for moving forward. I was very clear throughout this whole process because I received the message in the June board meeting that you wanted us to move with a sense of urgency, and I have moved with that sense of urgency. It's just that it takes time to develop relationships, to negotiate this process. I've been very clear with each of my districts whenever it comes up, can we ask for another extension? I said, absolutely not. You've been granted 2 extensions. So it's taken time to get to a place where we can now say, okay, we're ready to move forward with Orange Windsor, and we're requesting, therefore, the grant. We're applying for the grant for the boundary study.
Steve.
Just a couple of thoughts. Steve Dale from the School Boards Association. I was approached by the 2 SUs to assist with their process going forward, and I just thought I'd share a couple of perspectives that. Again, not speaking for the boards, just speaking as someone who's spent some time with them over the last month or 2. The first thing is that I think in terms of Meg's comments, those of us that are not involved in a particular district looking at this process, and particularly the amount of time you've all spent on this over a very long period of time, it's like, okay, what is this? And what's clear to me, and I think it's clear from the report that Meg submitted, is that she has spent a lot of time with her boards over a 3-month period, getting them to a place of saying, we want to move forward. You can't request a grant until you have a vote by both members, both SUs. These are not district votes; they're SU votes actually. So both SUs had to take a vote that they wanted to request a grant, and until they've taken that vote, then you can't get a grant. So they both took the votes within the last 2 weeks or so. So they have now asked us to assist them, and Mike DeWeese, who's a retired superintendent from Essex, has agreed to jump into this full bore, and I will be doing this as well. We have our first meeting with the 2 SU merger. There's a joint merger committee of the 2 SUs. They will. We hope that out of that meeting will come meetings every 2 weeks between now and. The hope would be if it could be the end of the week of January 5th, just because what would be good would be to do most of the work before the holiday week, come back, finalize the report, make sure that it's in good form, and then get it to you by, say, the 9th of January, which gives you then 2 weeks to look at it. Obviously, the hope would be that there's not a lot of analysis required. The hope is that by that time, the work has been done, there's a pretty clear pathway forward. You know, I think this is all unusual. I mean, thank God it's unusual because, I mean, the process is like nothing that I've really ever seen. I mean, the other ones that we've been involved in, usually there's like a full year of study that goes on and people sort of get to the point. there's a clear message from you all that you're going to take some action on January 20th. Most of the boards involved are in agreement with the general direction you put out. There's at least one exception to that is still working it through. But the question isn't, is anything going to happen or not going to happen? It's the scope of the variables has been narrowed pretty heavily. So when you ask the question of what's going to happen in the next 2 months, let me just read to you the things that are on our list. And again, this committee has not yet met. We have met with Bruce and Meg to talk about all this. But the question, and this just gives you a sense of the work, there is the question of, is this a hostile takeover, or is this one entity being absorbed into another? Or is this two entities coming together to create something new? That may sound academic, but it's not academic.
It's not. It's real.
And the hope would be that these two entities can come together, even though it's clear that sort of where this came from. The ideal would be that people come together to say, let's create something that's very exciting. And as Vaughn mentioned, the one meeting that he and I were both at, when the energy level in the room went up substantially was when people started to talk about what can we create in essence, in the White River Valley that would be really exciting for students. So, but that's an important discussion that they have not yet had. The prerequisites for a merger. You will remember, I think at the meeting, your last meeting discussing this in June, David Bickford said you ought to do an audit of the districts before there's an expectation they're going to come together. One of the things they need to sort out is, are there prerequisites that they would want to recommend to you when you issue your decision? Might there be a couple of things that would be included in that final decision that would be prerequisites? So, for example, the clean audit question, if there's any, folks may say, we're ready to go on this, we're excited about it, go ahead and make your decision. However, here's a couple of loose ends that may need to be taken care of. So those kinds of things. The overall mission, vision, goals, and values that will govern the new SU, these folks have not really had that conversation yet. They know about the mechanics of it, the structure, but they need to start to come together about what this is about. What are the potential educational benefits? There's been some discussion of that. They need to spend more time on that. The potential savings, there's been a lot of work done by the agency about that, but that needs to be brought into even more intimate focus now that people are actually moving forward. How do you envision this supervisory union functioning? We are creating, in doing this process that you're talking about, you're creating a supervisory union that's almost as big as North Country. And it's going to end up with, what, 10 boards?
10 districts.
Something, yeah. 10 districts, something of that kind. This is not something that should be entered into lightly. I feel like this is sort of like one of those marriage things where you say, does anybody know any reason why you shouldn't do it? It can be done, it should, and it likely should be done, but it should be done right, and it should be thought through in terms of how's this entity going to operate, because you don't want, we have a lot of examples of things that don't function all that well. So this needs to be done well. So these folks need to start that conversation, so this isn't just a loose confederation of 10 districts that are going to come together, but that it's a group of people creating something new that's going to operate differently, and it's designed to create opportunities for students that, in the long run, that will pay off big time. Agreeing on how the transition will be managed. One of the things that you need to include in your decision in January is, what's the transition board going to look like? What's its makeup? What's its authority? We have some examples of that. We know how that works from the Two Rivers situation. But this group has not talked about that at all. And so these folks need to understand that, in fact, during that transition time from January 20th until till July of 2016, there will be a lot of decisions made by that transition board, but your motion will need to include the creation of a transition board with authority to act on behalf of the new entity. There is the question about leadership over the next 18 months. This probably doesn't have to be solved before January 20th, but this is a dynamic situation. You've got two central offices, you've got people that have been living in this uncertainty for a very long time, and you've got two superintendents, and so there's a lot of sorting out of how's this all going to work. They will probably not try to sort that out before January 20th, but they'll need to spend some time grappling with that question. Obviously, one of the first things that needs to be done, and Mike will be jumping into this, is the review of all the studies. There's been all kinds of studies done in this area, and to make sure that we're not redoing the things that have already been done, and then the drafting of a report. So those are just some of the things that between now and January 20th, and these boards need to have the time to both also engage with each other to develop the kind of relationships that are necessary for this to actually happen. So I guess I would just like to say, based on my contact with the board chairs and the superintendents, that this process is going to get completed. It may not be smooth, it may not be perfect, and I'm not actually absolutely sure like how all this works in Bethel. But I think that it's important that they have enough time to. It's a very tight time frame. So if they meet 5 times or so between now and first week of January, I think that work can get done, and you can get a report that will be satisfactory.
Let me ask Vaughn, if we were to extend the deadline for the final report, how much time do you need to be prepared for the board meeting in between when the final report is filed and January 20th?
Accepting Superintendent Powden's assurances that Bethel is going in the direction she expects, I can do that in between January 1st and the board meeting.
They asked for the 5th or the 8th. They didn't ask for the 1st.
Oh, I thought the chair said the
Yeah, but
I could do it from the 8th.
The original request was the middle of January. That's the way I heard it. Friday, January 2nd is Friday, January 5th is Monday.
I wouldn't want it later than the 5th, Mr. Chairman, simply because I'd like to stay on very good terms with Mr. Thompson, and I need to get my work done and get it to him to get to you. So I wouldn't want it later than that, if it's the board's will.
Bill?
I would move that they have the report on the 5th, and that a motion be prepared by the secretary and the agency for action on the 21st. Based on what I just heard Steve say, that motion may be pretty complicated and long with several bullets on it, i.e. the audit requirement and so forth. Is that livable by everybody?
Well, let's.
I'm not second.
The motion is to extend the deadline for the final Windsor Northwest report to January 5th, 2015. Is there a second for that motion?
Yes.
Margaret seconds it. Discussion.
I'm sorry to, this feels like nitpicking, but I just, the New Year's, the holiday week, I assume school will be reconvening maybe Friday, maybe not till the 5th. We would like that committee to be able to meet to finalize the final version of a report, that the 5th, the 6th, I just don't know I have no idea what their scheduling is going to be, so if it could be till Wednesday, that gives you full 2 weeks, but it gives us then 2 days that week, either the 5th or the 6th.
It gives us a week, because he has to send it out a
Right.
week before. So
I
it gives
understand.
Vaughn, moving it to Wednesday, I think gives you 4 days,
It would
3 days.
3 days
It's a
plus
lot
the
to ask.
weekend.
So let's
Yeah.
say the 6th by 5 o'clock.
That's right, we just need to,
Can you do that, Vaughn? I mean, it's just a physical problem.
Well,
Is that he has to
not
be able to-
having seen it.
We don't know what-
I can do that, and if additional questions arise in the intervening time while I'm still looking at it, I'll raise it with the meeting.
And maybe a way to do it is, my guess is you'll have a preliminary, I mean, I just don't want to put Vaughn in a situation where he physically can't turn it around in time to post it for public
Yeah, I'm
meeting purposes.
thinking Vaughn needs 2 weeks, and you're right, there's a week prep, so that's Vaughn's gonna have to have this thing done before he actually gets the report.
The only other option,
No, I will
I mean,
drop
there's gonna
everything
be a
else.
lot of homework that has to be
and
done
it will
beforehand.
be, well, the other thing is it's not unusual, and it's it also has to be vetted by general counsel.
So it does. And it's the
And,
beginning of the legislative session,
and it is during.
and we are one deep. It's a reality.
And it is not, in fact, more often than not, and that's why drafts are really important. When the general counsel and I go over things, we engage in discussions with the committee and the consultant, and there are changes made. So if we were looking at a draft and getting those out of the way, and I wasn't receiving a cold document to then pass on to Greg at that moment in time, it would be a whole lot more doable.
So why don't we wait till February? I mean, it's a month.
Because then, as soon as you make the vote, the board, the transition board is able to draw down the transition grant and begin negotiating contracts and doing a whole bunch of things.
I just didn't know why.
I have to say this, I mean, it's interesting that we're now trying to figure out some days for Vaughn, after we've given this school district so much time to put this together, that you're now complaining that you don't have enough time for meetings.
I think we've got to cut bait here.
Yeah.
So
The motion is that the final report would be due on Monday, January 15th, 2015.
Fifth.
2015. Any further discussion?
And Sean Marie said the 6th at 5 by 5
No, that was
p.m.
just a,
So
that was just
that
a
was
thought.
not-
That would have been
Okay.
amendment.
I'm friendly between the 5th and the 7th. I can take any date on in there,
Well, the
but
motion
I'm
on the
just-
table is the 5th.
But just Vaughn, like that's, because I know it doesn't matter for us if it's 24-hour difference, but that might make a big difference.
Work for the secretary who wants me to concentrate on what the board needs, and that will be my top priority, and I'm used to working evenings. The potential problem is that either I or Mr. Glennon sees a problem, and we need to go back and discuss things with the board. So the more completed draft we have earlier than that, the more the probability of that happening falls off.
So what about a friendly
presuming you're going to
amendment?
get an
Stacy?
early draft.
I was thinking, can we build in December 15th, December 22nd, just some rough drafts that come in so that you're not looking at it cold, some other option with
Your
that?
ones would have to do it.
Is that a doable, I don't know if that's a
It's-
doable thing.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, if it ends up being the 5th, it ends up being the 5th, and we just, it's really just a question of whether that.
So I have a
how
technical
we
question.
get that.
So you have the votes necessary now. What I've been hearing is that you needed certain votes in order to apply for this, whatever you're applying for. Now, are you saying that there's going to be other votes before the final report is submitted? Are you saying that the final report has to be voted on by certain districts?
The supervisory unions have applied for the grant, and my understanding is the supervisory union boards or their executive committees have approved it. That's all that's necessary for the
Okay,
original
so
grant.
so that is moving forward. Now, before the final report is submitted, are there board votes that need to take place?
See? That's what I say, leave it alone.
I don't believe
I
so.
want-
I think
Not
it's
that
the
I'm aware of.
supervisory unions.
Can I,
But I just want to make sure that we understand that your votes that you needed are already there. And you don't need any more votes before the report is submitted. You just want the report to be finalized and thorough.
I would think, don't you, the supervisory union boards don't need a vote on this for the final report?
they will,
They will. That's
They
what,
will.
that's what
I
Steve
wasn't
said.
aware that they needed to.
Well,
they will.
But-
Whether they need to or not,
Yeah.
they will.
I think those are really important. Those
I would
votes.
think they would want to.
I think they need
They
to.
probably
I
would.
agree.
Well, they probably need a formal vote, but I'm assuming their executive committee is empowered to vote on their behalf and they can pick up the full vote later.
To be technical, I believe it is the case. I know it's the case for Reds. I'm not sure for supervisory union mergers.
I think it's a process issue. I think
It-
you're.
That's
I
exactly
think it's a
right.
process issue. Yeah.
You want
I
to
don't-
do it, I'm not sure you have to.
I don't want anybody to leave this room
Bruce?
believing that we're worried about the fact that we're now going to move forward and reach some success at some point. Meg and I aren't worried about it. I mean, and we're in the middle of all of this. I've heard the words fear, and I know you guys have been patient over a long period of time, but after last night, I don't have a whole lot of fear. I think once we get these people, they're all reasonable, good people, and they want to do what's best for the kids in their districts. And once we get them around the table, it's going to be fine, I think.
So
I'm optimistic about that.
So to move this, it sounds like you can get an interim draft to Vaughn so that we can begin to look at preliminary work in December, and then give you, it sounds like you're saying that moving it to the 6th would be very, very helpful to you in terms of having a day to have people vote.
And that's why I'm asking about voting.
6 to 5 o'clock.
Is that something that's tenable, Vaughn?
6 is, in fact, I would expect that they would extend the courtesy of giving me the report they're voting on the 6th, on the 5th, and I could already start getting into it.
And I think you've had open communication, so it would not surprise me if you saw everything in December. But I think, is that something that maybe the board wants to consider?
So the friendly amendment, I would make a friendly amendment to end of the day on the 6th.
With the interim?
Just as a matter of, I mean, if we're trying to draw together a SUs, is that the meeting that we're talking about, board members? For the 5th? You might as well make it midnight on the 6th then,
Well, that's
because
why I said
otherwise it
end
doesn't
of the
give them
day.
any time.
I said end of the
Okay.
day. I didn't put 6 o'clock on this one. I said end of day.
All right, so, and I'm a little out of order here, but so what I'm hearing is that there's an amendment that's about to be made to the original motion suggesting, or establishing January 6th, with the stipulation that the agency would receive preliminary reports during the process.
Yes.
I see you both nodding.
Yes.
Okay, Sean Marie has moved to amend the motion to
I would just simply take that as a friendly amendment and modify my motion if the second is okay with it, and she's nodding her head, so 6 it is.
Okay. The motion before the board then is that the final report from Windsor Northwest is due January 6, 2015. However, the supervisory union shall submit preliminary reports to Vaughn during the process. Drafts. Is there a second to Sean Marie's?
Second.
That's Bill's motion, Sean Marie seconded.
No, Krista.
And so Bill's out of it altogether, okay.
Fighting.
It's Sean Marie's motion, and Krista made the second. Any discussion? Sorry, Bill.
Doesn't matter.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we've established a new deadline with the addition of some preliminary reports.
Can I say one more thing while we have the two superintendents? I just wanted to point out that I know both of you have applied for one of the grants for the proficiency-based graduation. That's about $50,000 because we're going to look at the two of you separately. We are going to arrange to have you scheduled into the same rooms. We'll do any support we can. But I say that as a way of encouraging you, having been through a transition like this myself, to really think ahead and grab every opportunity you can to help your SUs think as one SU moving forward. And if you see other opportunities for us to support you, please be very proactive in reaching out to us, and we can try to help you do that, because I really appreciate your taking on the hard work. I think it's hard, but I think it'll be worth it. And to pick up on something Stephen said about uncertainty, I remember being, Meg, in your district, and that's what a teacher said to me. They said, we just need to know. And so I actually think that when your boards do make this decision, it's going to be a huge relief for your educators who just need to know so that they can begin to move forward and do all the good work they want to do. So let us help you with that.
And please understand, the two of you, that any negative connotations that you may have picked up here, either from the chair or other board members, it's not personally directed at the two of you. We understand you're late to the game, and in fact, we really commend you for what you've accomplished. It's more to do with the frustration of the whole process that's gone on too long. So please don't take anything personally.
Okay, thank you.
With that, we'll recess for lunch. And where do we go, Perry?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
We're on the record.
Good afternoon. I am sitting in for the chair of the state board. We're going to convene a few minutes early. And Rebecca, I understand we have somebody we're sliding into the agenda.
Oh, well, I don't.
Sean. Or my,
he's not, but Sean is, he's not in the agenda?
Not in the one that was mailed.
Okay.
Maybe he's in a
Welcome,
new.
Mr. Welcome, Mr. McMahon. And really, this is the whole reason I think we come to schools, is to actually see what is going on in the field, and particularly how it speaks to the kinds of conversations that this board has, and certainly it speaks to the legislative agenda that we had this morning. So I'm just going to turn it over and save the time for you, Sean, to talk to us about your school and what you're doing.
Sean, I apologize. I wasn't sure where you fit in on the agenda. I know Steve will actually never watch this tape. He will read the minutes. So I do have a deadline, though, to get us out of here on time. So we'll,
this is more important.
Well, you know what?
Definitely more important.
We spell our first names the same, so
We do.
I'll give you a pass on that one.
That's good. They were expecting a boy.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to thank the state board for your work and supporting the work that we do at the building and the district level, and know that it's very, very important, and we appreciate your advocacy within the group and outside with the legislature and the agency and so forth. So thank you, and thanks for coming to Winooski.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's been interesting. Yeah, we need parking. That is true.
But lunch was fabulous.
Oh, lunch was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So one of the things that's been interesting for me is I came from CVU down the road in Heinsberg, having been there 11 or 12 years at a regional high school, and then coming to a pre-K-12 district with a very different makeup in the population. And so it's been wonderful to see the differences that we have across our state that are only a few miles apart in some cases. And so just to give you a quick background for some of you that may not know, we are a pre-K-12 single district. We have 2 preschools with 3 different programs in them right now, and hoping to continue to expand. We just opened a new preschool this year that the board supported with some money to renovate one of the existing rooms in our building, and we're really proud of that. We are a school of just under 800 students, K-12. We have about a third to 35% of our students are English language learners. We have just under 80% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. And we have joined, we're one of the first ones to jump in on the community eligibility provision, and we've seen a significant spike in the amount of children that we've been able to, that have been accessing those meals this year, which has been fantastic. So that's a little bit about us. Another thing I'd mention, our primary ELL populations come from Nepal and Bhutan and Somalia, and make up a big portion, although we have over 30 different languages, dialects within those languages that are spoken across our city. Those are the primary cultures that we have, and we feel really, really blessed to have that level of diversity in our city and in our school. So what I wanted to start with you was to just show you a little bit about where Winooski is headed and how we plan on getting there. And then at the end, I will bring that back to you in your role a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Okay. So behind me is a visual that I've used with our staff about where we're headed. And at the top, really starts with board leadership. And our board has taken the great step and courageous step in adopting a policy governance structure. 5-person board, and they spent the last couple of years making sure that their policies policies were all in place. They adopted many policies as prescribed by policy governance, and they have begun to operate within that structure and have done a wonderful job the last 2 years. So leadership really starts from the top, and they have developed an end statement, which you can see there, which you'll probably recognize a lot of the words, college and career readiness, but also we really talk about health, productivity, and success, and the engaging with different all different types of communities, whether it's within the school, in the city, the state, and beyond globally. So our school board has really set the stage and given me the directive as the CEO of the organization. Now you need to go figure out what the means are in order to show that students are meeting the ends. And then right below that is what we call our GXs, or our graduate expectations. So this ties in with the work that's being done around proficiency-based learning. And these were with the help of, with collaboration with Burlington School District and the support of the Nellie Mae Education Foundation funding. These are locally developed with input from the community. And I like to refer to these as really transferable skills. These are the skills that our students are going to need when they go out in the future, and they're going to have 14 to 20 different jobs over the course of their lifetime, and they're going to need to be able to shift between those fields, and these are those skills that will transfer between. Now, in order to meet those ends and to practice those graduate expectations, we have two ways that we're doing that through learning. And the first one is project-based learning, or PBL, which has been around for 100 years. The Buck Institute leads a lot of that work. And it's really about having students ask authentic questions, get involved in their community outside the four walls of the school, collaborating, and then sharing their learning in public audiences. And so we've just started professional development and beginning units in our elementary school around project-based learning. What happens then when this is all preparation for when students get to middle and high school, where they will do what's called SEL, or student-centered learning. And that will be based on proficiencies, and students will be combining essential content, the math, the science, and so forth, with the GXs, or the transferable skills, to create and design and implement their own learning opportunities, which then pulls you down to the next one of PLPs. So personalized learning plans. So that is what will, the process and the document that will contain for middle and high school students, how are they going to meet those ends? How are they going to show proficiency in transferable skills and in those essential content areas? So there's a little bit about project-based learning, significant content, the 21st century skills that really are reflected in our GXs and the education quality standards. And then you're probably very familiar with this, with Act 77 and the PLP language. And then finally, what the underpinning of all this work in Winooski is what we've identified as our biggest challenge is many of our students, they're not ready for this learning, and they're losing instructional time because they're not ready, whether it's because of food insecurity, whether it's because of emotional, social skills not quite where they need to be so that they can access the instruction. So for us, this idea of wellness is the foundation so that we can do all of these other things. And some of the things that we're doing around wellness is we have a mindfulness program, and we're working with the Center for Mindful Learning out of Burlington. We're in our second year in the elementary. It's ramping on in the middle and the high school right now. We have what's called Spartans in Motion, which is our movement program, which is in the middle school. So we're really practicing the neuroscience so that students can be more ready to learn and have more time, what I like to say, more time on the ball. You know, that's what coaches talk about in sports is how do we get kids to have more time on the ball, because that's how they're going to get better at what they're doing. And we need to increase that, that learning time for our students. So finally, I would just point you to this great quote. And children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate. One of the things that we talk about here is, with the adults, is that we have that opportunity every second with our students, and to be leaders. And they will go as we go. And so when we're patient, and when we're loving, and when we push kids to learn, and when we develop strong relationships so we know when we can push and we know when we have to back off, and then students are going to learn at a much higher rate than if that leadership is not present. So finally, my ask to the board would be that there's been all of these wonderful research-based great things that are being put into place, whether it's PLPs, whether it's dual enrollment, pre-K, and so forth. Proficiencies, it's all great stuff. Please don't give us more. And work with the folks who make those decisions to say to them, okay, we've charted a course, there's enough on the plate. Now, instead of getting the shiny object syndrome where we start grabbing everything that comes along because we think it's going to solve our problems in the short term, let's dig in, let's fend off the stuff that doesn't point us to where we want to go, and let's do the stuff that we're committed to with depth and with substance.
Well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to answer or try to answer any questions. And I would like to also invite you. I have one of our high school teachers, Matt Webb, whose class is in the background, and he runs our iLab, which is a proficiency-based independent learning program for middle and high schoolers. He is going to bring some students, and when your meeting is finished, he's happy to take you around for a tour of the building for 15 or 20 minutes for those of you that can stay.
Great, thank you. Morgan?
Yeah, I just want to know, like, what's the student perception of all of this? Or particularly high school students, are they as excited as you seem to be? Are they on board with all of it?
At this level, students are not as familiar with that. What they're really familiar, the high school students in particular, and it's getting into middle school, are the graduate expectations. And the idea that they will have PLPs and they will have voice and choice in their learning.
Right.
And last year we had about 55, I think we're up to about 70 students this year from middle and high school who are going to the iLab, and they're deciding how they want to learn and what they're going to learn. It has to be within that frame of essential content and the graduate expectations, but they can say, here's how I want to do it. And it doesn't need to be in here.
That's great.
Does that help
That's
answer your
exactly
question?
what I needed to know, yeah.
Sean, is this one campus?
It is.
Dylan?
So if I'm an ELL student who's like, English is not my first language, how does that affect some of the graduation requirements or understanding some of those things that are further understanding than just getting your basic content?
Yeah. So I think what's really important to think about is we really think about students who come in with English language learning needs on a continuum, and a very broad continuum. So we have everything from 19 and 20-year-old adult students who come in who have never been in a formal educational setting and have no English. And then we have other students who come and they have been in school and they have pretty good English and they can kind of jump right in, and then everything in between. And then there are differences within those cultures, right? In terms of educational background, in terms of how you learn English, whether or not you have a written language. So it's a very complex continuum to deal with. So it really is about meeting those students where they are when they come in, doing a lot of assessment and figuring out what the best plan is to move them along. And they start really with kind of introductory social language that they learn. The academic language takes 3 to 5 years to really, when you're starting from scratch, to acquire. Does that answer?
Yeah.
So for how long have you had about 35% ELL students in this district?
I think we've been in the 30% for about the last 4 years or so. The number of students has gone from, in about 12 years, from 65 to a third what we have right now, which is about 240.
And how many students in your high school, Sean?
230.
Thank you.
Somebody had, Rebecca.
I would just like to know how long it took you to set those graduate expectations, and what was the process you used to build consensus?
So that process was really convened by the Partnership for Change, which is the group that kind of combines Burlington and Winooski under the Nellie Mae Foundation grant. And the process was to get community input. So there was a GX committee from Burlington and Winooski. They went out and they got input from the community. They held forums with parents, community members, and basically asked, what are the skills that we want our students to have when they leave high school? And then they took all of that information, they compared it also locally and regionally and nationally with other schools who were doing this work around proficiencies. And then that committee, which was made up of students and staff and some parents, they came up with the GXs, and then they brought them forward. And it really was a building level decision about adopting the GXs at that point.
And I know you actually said this in your presentation, but how long did it take the board to then adopt that? Did you say it was a 2-year process?
About 1.5 years, 2 years, yeah. Yeah, but within one of the important distinctions in policy governance is that what the board is responsible is that end statement. The GXs are really kind of another layer below. So while the board had some input and they were being reported to on how that work was going, ultimately in the model, it was not their decision to say yes or no, because that's how we are going to get to the ends. That makes sense.
In that same vein, Sean, did you come from a policy governance environment?
I did not.
And what was the learning curve for you on that?
I was a part of, VSBA had a great network that sponsored policy governance work each month. Val Gardner, Harry Frank, and that was really helpful. My board chair and I went to all of those. I went out of state and did a couple-day training on policy government, but it really, for me, it was a lot of the theory and the practice. So the practice was working with my board chair on agenda planning and knowing what our policies were and what they said about that process, and us holding each other responsible to stick to that. Then in meetings, we do what we call gentle reminders across the board sometimes. So when somebody's not sticking to where we need to be, somebody will gently remind them that this is what our policy says about this particular area. But yeah, I think that for me, the learning curve was steep, but very helpful to have this structure. You know, while at CVU, and we had a bigger board, an 11-person board, and it was a very high-functioning board, in my opinion, it didn't have that anchor to our work. And this, we always have something, no matter what comes up, no matter who walks in the door, what the issue is, we always have a policy that we can go to, and it will guide us to how we deal with whatever's up.
Great, thank you.
We have gentle reminders on our list.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Good.
Thank you, Bonnie, for that. This was great. I really, really appreciate it. Any more questions from the students? Great. Thank you so much.
Yep,
and we'll
thank
look
you.
forward to the tour.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the pre-K rulemaking status update. Is Karen not here?
I'm a little worried because Karen is
see her.
not here.
So we'll just jump right in with Bonnie to I for the strategic plan. And she can give us an update on that, and we'll definitely go back to Karen when she gets here.
Okay. So hopefully everybody got a draft copy of the strategic plan. Let me get the one that. Did everybody get it?
Yes.
And I wanted to say thank you to, the committee really did the work. I just sort of pulled it all together. Lots of people weighed in. I think it's at a place that we can move forward. I did note that there were a couple places that we sort of have to make a decision in terms of, I think there is still a question about equality versus equity. And so we need to hone that one down and decide equity. Last night it was equity for me. But I'm only one of 10 of you. But anyway, I don't know if we want to start with questions or thoughts.
Bonnie, I just, I'm wondering, and it just occurred to me that I don't know if I didn't bring it up or if it's an oversight, but since we are now a policy board, one of the things we've been talking about over the last year plus is taking a look at our rulemaking and what's in the rules. And so I don't see in the strategic plan or the strategic goals that we would be looking at. I know it came up in June when we talked around the tables about our rulemaking and like reviewing the rules that we're responsible for. They're sort of,
So that would
So-
fit under efficiency and stability, right? In a way, because any inconsistencies in our rules would help support, could go in there.
So are you suggesting that as part of our ongoing work? Is that what you were,
Yes.
I vaguely remember it coming up and I don't, but I think Margaret might be right, that's where we would put it. So where it says this requires examination and work in a number of areas, would we, that's on page 3.
Yeah.
okay, finance staff, okay. So I guess what I would say is one of the areas would be the board's rulemaking. In other words, we're responsible, and the rulemaking is from everything from approving the construction, or that's part of legislation, but our rulemaking is pretty extensive. So, Stephanie?
Stacy? It's okay. It begins with an S.
Stacy?
I hear what you're saying. I'm wondering, I think when our group first was talking about this, we were trying to create a really tight document, almost to do part of what Sean was saying, like the thing that we always tethered back to kind of in a
Right.
strategic goals, not all the steps in the work. So I wouldn't want to lose that idea, because I think we should have that down, that that's something we do every year or every month in a periodic way. But do we want to, like, already in a way, it looks longer to me than maybe I think we had first imagined, something, like that nice little graph with 5 little items. Is there another place where we can parking lot? Here are the things we want to make sure we get to in this next year or two. I mean, I'm not opposed to adding it, but I think that's just another way to look at this strategic goal, not all work to be done.
Yes, it's almost like this is the long-range strategic plan, and then you have a year-by-year work plan,
Right.
those specific goals, and that would be a part of that.
Okay.
But we don't want to lose it, so maybe it gets,
Start creating another document?
I
yeah,
don't
it's
know if we-
almost like, what's the work plan, and that's on
Right.
part of the work plan. That fits towards these
Well, I guess
strategic goals.
you have, I mean, it could just be another bullet that is ongoing.
Yep, we could add it as another bullet. Does that work for you, Bill?
Reviewing the rulemaking.
Yeah, it should be in Title I in terms of how the machinery operates.
Right.
And we should dust that off and see what it says. But
Given
it
that our
raises
role has
the other
changed.
question is, if we're going to systematically go back and look at all of the areas in which we're supposed to be looking at policy, that would be huge.
It'll take years. It would.
And frankly, I would worry that it would overwhelm us when we have EQS developing and other things happening. But there are a couple of 3 places in rulemaking I think we probably ought to go back and look at. One of them is approval of independent schools in that process and things like that. To me, I'd like to see a more consistent format in reading what I see on the consent agenda. But I'm thinking we should address those one-off rather than systematically.
Right.
I'll call you the right name. Krista?
Okay, good. So maybe adding it just on the front page there, that when you have the years, maybe the year 1, just to kind of summarize that, is identify areas from rulemaking review. Maybe that's part of that first one, and then moving forward is then identifying going through.
Where is that, Krista, that you're
On
suggesting?
on the
Page
first
1.
page, and you list, like, this is what you want for year 1. Number 2, explore solutions, create, and that's year
okay.
2. So maybe that's just an addition to year 1. And then year
okay.
2 through
Within-
5 is
got it.
actually implementing rules. So it wouldn't have to add too much bulk to this document, but just maybe in the very first part.
Then that way it
Focus is
maintains,
popcorn.
that way it's in there and it
Right.
stays in there. And we do it as we need to do it versus,
Exactly, yeah.
A separate task.
I think that, does that meet with everybody's? It makes sense to me. Okay, so I'll make it,
So you're going to add it
I'm
into
gonna
number 2?
add, tell me what I'm adding. Or did-
It just, maybe on, so you have here number 1.
Yeah, so I
define,
would be-
identify problems state faces. Maybe also below that, like another, like 1A, or just, you could even.
Or
make
just
it
2.
Yeah, and
or
just
4.
identify areas from rulemaking review.
Right.
And then years 2 through 5 would actually be going through, after we identify which areas do we want to address, then breaking that up for the next couple of years.
That addresses it for me.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody else on the board? Okay.
And that way we don't lose it.
Right.
And it's up front and it's not, okay, that works.
I was really happy to see on the second page, at the last meeting, I think they were called like problems or some challenges that we've identified. But now they're just pressing questions. And I think it works much better. It feels less heavy and daunting when they're just puzzling questions, like here's some gaps that we found. And
Thank Margaret for the term pressing questions. But I heard that from the committee, from the board, that it felt a little negative the other way. So it's an inquiry-based.
Yeah, it
No,
also,
it's good.
It also felt very certain, and this week this is a collection of data. This is the year 1 and 2 business where we draw
out what it
conclusions
is.
after we've seen evidence rather than based on assumptions.
Yep, I thought that was fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we talked about that last meeting.
Yeah.
Just that they were concerned that if you are trying to keep things the same, then that's really not any sort of innovation.
Yeah.
So it was just
So are you suggesting that, are you liking where we went
We
to?
should discuss what language specifically.
I think we have it as stability.
Personally, I prefer sustainability.
because stability, like, you could reach stability, but is that stability sustainable? So, like, shouldn't our ultimate goal be sustainability?
Yeah, because stability seems kind of fixed to me.
Yeah.
The problem I have with sustainability is it's a political term. It is not an empirical term when you're looking at educational finance. If you were talking about sustainability, you would probably operationalize it as something like when 90% of your school budget's passed, that means it's sustainable, and when 90% of them fail, it's not sustainable. But just used in the abstract, it means anything the speaker wants it to make. I'm not sure stability. I think stability of the public education is important, but when we're talking about finance, I'm just trying to be precise in the language.
So
So-
are you agreeing with?
No, he's disagreeing with the stability. I
Yeah,
mean, sustainability.
Right,
I'm disagreeing, but I'm open to other suggestions to try to clarify it.
Perry, you look like me.
Yeah. What? Well,
Can I take a stab at this just for a second? Because like, the italicized piece of it says, ensure the public education system is stable and efficient. So maybe we just use efficient and stable public education. You know, I don't know if, I tend to like stability just because we want to make sure, I see it as lasting versus sustainable, which
What about
I'm not sure what that
reliable?
means. Reliable?
But you can have a crap system that's stable and reliable,
You could have a,
but it's not sustainable.
So what if you took the italics and just made that goal number 2?
That's a long,
no.
just iterating.
Well, it gets around the, to ensure that the public education system is stable, efficient, and responsive to ever-changing population needs, economic issues, and the 21st century concerns. I mean, that's the goal. The goal isn't efficiency. The goal is
Right.
this whole,
Right, it is the whole thing.
it's the whole idea. And maybe you do the same thing for 1 if we're going to be consistent.
We can certainly be consistent in that. That works for me.
So, I know we like less is more, but, and we're at 3
not-
pages still.
Right, it's still pretty small.
It's pretty short for
Yeah.
a strategic plan.
Can everybody live with that, or is there,
Yeah,
are there?
I like
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay, so we'll do that. And we'll do the same thing for goal 1.
And that way it's a little more, it has a little more explanation. We can also, you can put it in bold.
I'll put it, Perry, you getting all this? Because right now, I'm turning it over to you. When I leave, I'm done.
I'll take a trip to Florida.
I just have
They're pretty minor.
maybe just a nitpick, but 21st century concerns. Can we just say modern? I mean, it's one of those terms that, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just struggle with because we're there.
I know, we are there.
We're there. It's not like we're projecting to the future anymore, and it's the language from maybe 20 years ago. But can we just economic issues and modern concerns, because they're going to keep changing.
Current?
Yeah, current or something. So,
Present concern.
it's just it's one of those things that we keep saying over and over. But what does that actually mean? And because we're already there, it's our.
I think it is defined when you look at, like Chamber of Commerce and so forth when it comes to business.
The next board can make it 22nd century.
issues. Okay. I think it's just something that.
Well, the three concerns we specify, finance, staffing, and leadership, are current concerns. They're not necessarily specific to the 21st century.
We want them to be.
But I think 21st century does not evoke, maybe it's just those of us who are like pre-internet and post-internet, but I think it's, to me, 21st century concerns means learning is changing based on the rapidly evolving technology, and we need to make sure that education is responsible to that, in addition to economic needs and changing all these other things, that technology is moving faster than we can create policy, right? We have to keep an eye on that.
So is it? Do you want to say technology concerns then, or like and?
But they're not listed.
But it's not. They're not just
technology
technology concerns. They're concerns they're concerns that are informed by technology and ever-changing technology, but they're not just technology.
But I bet back in 1880 they had finance, staffing, and leadership concerns too. So it's current issues,
not.
right? Oh, I bet they did with all those little one-room schools. And only women teachers who were unmarried.
I'm not wedded to it, but to me, I know what 21st century concerns means more than modern concerns.
Right, I think this would translate better.
Yeah.
To what?
I mean, to the public.
What, 21st century?
concerns.
And it is for the public.
I know, and of course, I'm going back to that word concerns.
You don't like concerns?
Well, it's issues. It is issues, but you've already written the word economic.
Well, just stop after economic issues and get rid of the rest of the sentence.
Needs, or economic and 21st century concerns.
I think I like it. The 21st century is fine.
I mean, instead of just getting rid of it, Margaret, you'd put a.
Yeah.
Oh, get rid of issues.
Put the word issues after century.
Got it.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Okay.
I see.
Then they can take care of it.
Then we get rid of concerns and we leave 21st.
And we leave 21st century concerns.
Keep 21st century.
Because they are different.
Wait, I'm
Did you get it?
hearing we're dropping concerns.
We're dropping concerns.
We're not concerned about it.
We don't we're not yet.
They're issues.
So it's going to read, Perry.
I'm concerned that this is.
Right.
I don't have
So it's going to say economic and 21st century issues. Got it? Okay.
Wait, but then it says.
All right, wordsmithing as a group is really tough.
But then it says changing population needs, economic. Okay, I don't know.
Got it? It's okay.
We have a rhythm going. Population needs, economic issues, 21st century concerns. But then you mess with that flow when you say population needs and economic. I don't know.
Issues.
I get.
So we'll give it to somebody. We'll give it to Perry to wordsmith, and he can send it out.
We have it in a Google Doc.
We do.
So you can go on there and.
Yeah, I'll play with that, but I think we have the general gist of what we want. And because we're going to vote on this in November.
November. So could you just review the time frame process piece?
We vote on this in November, and then it goes out to public comment in December, right?
And that's
between November and December.
And that's a question, what is that process and how do we do this public comment? And does it go around the state? How do we get this out so people can respond to it?
Rebecca, do you know who we ask for that?
Yeah.
Who we ask about the
process
The
for public
process
comment?
for
Yeah.
public comment?
What did you do last time?
I think I think none of us were here the last time, but I think we can.
Exactly.
Bill Talbot was.
Bonnie probably was.
Right.
I wasn't.
No, no.
Oh, no,
I
no.
think presumably we set up.
No, Bill and Sean Marie have been on longer than me.
Okay.
We can track it down. We'll
Okay.
find out. And why don't
Yeah, I
we,
have
Perry, why don't
no
we get
idea.
back to them? We can find it in Carol's records. My assumption is that we have to create some forum for public input.
I think it's one of those one-off usages that isn't like the rules-making process. I think it's just stuck right there in that section of law, and
Right.
it means,
I presume it
Website.
could also be up on the website,
Yeah.
but then it's also that people could come to a forum. We could set up time for public comment on the next agenda, for
Agenda.
example,
Yeah.
and they could come here for that.
So the draft could go up on the website.
Yeah,
and People
absolutely.
could respond or come to the meeting.
And then we can bring it to the next meeting too.
So we vote in November because we'll be up in the hinterlands of the northern end of the state, and then the next meeting is here in
Right.
Burlington, right? So,
January.
January. All right. Thank you, Bonnie, and your committee.
No,
for
thank the
your-
committee, they did a lot of work.
Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Bill, Stacy. What?
Can I just have one more, just really quick, under staffing, it kind of goes back and forth between saying teachers and staff and then mixing up the two. Is it, we're saying that we have a generous complement of staff in the nation and then the exact staffing pattern, are we looking at teaching patterns or staffing patterns? Because if you're looking at teachers, that could be just the teachers in the school building. If you're looking at staff, that could be anywhere from, like at my school, we have an alumni coordinator, we have a farm to school coordinator, that's staff. So are we looking for staffing ratios or teaching ratios? And that's, it kind of mixes between the two in this.
Where is
So,
it?
It sort of says both.
It says both.
yeah,
Yeah.
the first sentence says both, and we're high in both regarded.
Yeah.
Even granted, and I would say teachers are people who have to have a license to do what they're doing, and staffing is everybody else, but we need to look at both.
We do need to look at both.
okay, so as long as, it just seemed like, because in the first comment of teachers and staff and then going on to staffing, okay. Just want to make sure where
Because
we're going.
when they
both.
count, they count everybody.
Right.
It's not just
And just trying to
teachers.
understand, like, what
Yeah.
is that count? So we're counting people, and what has the increase been in different areas?
So you're okay?
Okay, yeah,
So
as long
good.
as, it just, as long as it's both.
And it's not so much the increases that there hasn't been a decrease.
So the next
Declining enrollment.
The next item on the agenda is the pre-K rulemaking status update. Karen Edwards is not here, so we have a couple choices. We can phone her in on either a cell phone or a landline. We can have Bill Talbot and Rebecca answer as many questions as we might have. And we could then receive a memo on answers to questions that weren't answered. I do not think we can put it off because there is a time frame, which I think is one of the questions is what is the time frame? So what is the board's pleasure?
I think it would be helpful if we generated the questions and we gave them a list and then let the agency work on it when they can.
And can Bill and Rebecca answer questions?
And if it's an easy answer and you
Yeah.
have it, but I wouldn't want you to feel put in the spot.
Right,
There might be a couple, but what we could do is we can promise that you get written answers to anything that we can't answer. If you'd like, we can also try to bring Karen in on the phone.
Next time.
So would you like to try and bring Karen in on the phone?
Why don't we see if we have any questions for you?
Let's see what the
So Bill,
question
Bill, would you mind coming up to the table? And I don't know, one of my questions that I haven't asked Bill directly was what is the time frame and the public hearing dates that are set for this? Do either of you know that?
I don't know the specific
We
dates.
do have a one-page. I will ask Karen to send that because we have that all written out, unfortunately. This is why I'm saying if she was on the phone, that's something she could tell you very, very quickly.
So can we call her on a cell phone?
If someone does, we could probably put the cell phone up to the speaker and then you'd be able to hear it. I'm so sorry.
Going off the record for a second.
First,
Apologies, I don't know, I somehow totally missed this.
that's okay.
She's on the record.
Okay,
You're on
so-
the record.
So are we back on the record?
Yes.
So we're live, or somewhat live.
So
Go ahead, Rebecca.
The first question was the State Board was hoping you could talk through the process, and specifically what's the timeline for rules development and implementation and public hearings and all of that?
Okay, Greg is working on the iCard filing. He may have that done. I haven't checked in with him this week. So it will go to iCar, and then we will have the public hearings in November. I think we were thinking mid to late November they would begin. Then, we'll have to digest all those comments and make changes as needed, and, do a write-up of comments and reasons why we might not have made changes, and then hopefully be back to the state board for discussion in March, or February or March, and for the state board final vote in March or April, and then to LCAR, and then posting.
Thank you, Karen. This is Sean Marie in for Stephen Morris. I think we have a couple questions from the board for you. Thank you for that answer. Will there be more than one public hearing or just one in November?
We've talked about doing interactive TV hearings so that we can do them in a number of different places.
Okay, great. Bill?
My recollection from last month is that we gave some kind of...
We'll repeat the question once it's been asked.
Good.
Did you hear that, Karen?
I haven't heard the question.
No, we'll repeat the
Okay.
question after Bill says it.
The question is when do we see the rules? I recall last month that we gave a blanket approval to go ahead with the procedural things, but I don't recall seeing the rules.
That was a draft. I think the question was when at the last meeting the board looked at something and then gave an approval to proceed. What Bill would like to know is when the board will see the draft of the rules.
They can see them anytime. I could get them to Maureen to send out. The only change from what was shared at the last board meeting is the addition that Bill made.
So, Bill, what we approved were the draft rules, and now they're going to go, you're taking public comment from people who are submitting it right now, correct?
Yes, we've been getting comments from, well, we haven't acted on any of it, but we've been getting comments since we started the process of writing the rules.
So I know Mark has a number of questions.
But just to mark that, so Karen, if you could get the current draft of the rules to Perry can forward them to the state board.
Okay, I can do that this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Mark, no?
Not specifically, I mean.
He says not specifically. I thought he might have had some questions from an earlier conversation that was taking place. I will ask, the rules speak to certain dates that are coming up for budgets for FY16 and for partnerships and regional
Geographic boundaries.
Geographic boundaries. And I believe, although we weren't formally on the record at the time, that there was talk about some transitional rules. Can you speak to that?
There's interim guidance should be finished this week, and I can tell you some of the dates, and we worked on that with Susan March yesterday. Also, Brad James has guidance for business managers that I think is going through final review. I know it's been commented on. I think probably it's waiting to go to Rebecca and then get sent out to the field. The hope being that will go out this week. Hold on.
My sense is that things that are in queue to go out are the pre-qualification guidelines for private providers, a set of guidance on how this will play out, and guidance for the budgeting process. There's some guidance going out with respect to Title I, I believe, and there's there's another piece. Oh, and then there's a setup of all the sort of a timeline.
Yeah. So for pre-qualification, the application will be available at the latest on the 21st of November. their applications will be accepted on an ongoing basis and reviewed within 30 days at a maximum. And if a student, if a program is not pre-qualified and they then go and do whatever they need to do to be pre-qualified, they can resubmit. Pre-K, excuse me, the pre-K regions, the application, we're aiming for the application out December 1st, return here by January 15th, and a decision by April 15th. That one's a little bit more complicated because of all the people that have to be part of that. In terms of establishing and expanding school programs, that's going to be on the same application as pre-qualification. So if a school wants to do an expansion that would require either additional teachers or additional classroom space, they need to apply for that. To simplify it, we're going to have that be on the same application as the pre-qualification in the same timeline. Then the interim guidance is addressing enrollment procedures, just as a reminder to people that students who are going to have the tuition paid will need to enroll in their local public school using whatever process that school uses. And since we can't put a complaint process in place, and we may have disagreements about pre-qualification or any one of these items, we're going to put on the application that if a school does not agree, they can a review by the people who did the initial approval.
Thank you, Karen. Is there requirements for school districts that may not have pre-K programs to develop the applications for their supervisory unions?
There is no requirement that they do that, but if they are going to, if they're going to create a program, they would have to apply both for pre-qualification and for expansion.
Bill has a question.
Yeah, some people ask questions about the quality of the STARS program as an evaluation tool, and I share those kinds of concerns. But when I think about the huge private-public mix with a mix of child care providers and early ed providers and all kinds of combinations there, how are we going to assure that we have high-quality programs in all of these various combinations? And what
we're going to do our best. And there's a good chunk of money in the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant to develop a pre-K monitoring system. You know, we've really only had licensing and license reviews, which are more safety reviews than quality reviews. So that we will be working on. I think that, you know, it will be a combination of looking at data, looking at assessment scores, looking at on-site visits, looking at credentials.
So, Bill's question, in part, was specific to the STARS program. So, your answer was more broad-based, right? So it was both reviewing the STARS.
Okay, another part of the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant is to have an outside evaluation done of the STARS program.
Okay.
And that's to see if it, you know, it really to take a look. Is it measuring quality? Is there a distinction from 4 stars to 5 stars? And I believe that the RFP for that contract has gone out.
So, Bill, do you want to follow up on that?
No, that was the evaluation of the STARS process itself, not necessarily the evaluation of each of the schools using the STARS model.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, so in the grant there are funds to do both.
And you're talking about the grant that's already been secured, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And the work on the evaluation of the STARS program is taking place within AHS.
Great, thank you.
I think we need to ask the big Title I question about the money of the 23 supervisory unions who are quote, supplanting, unquote, and we'll have to move that money out of preschool education, which will put a huge dent in their budget. What's the latest status on this, and have we inquired of the feds formally to get an opinion on whether we can do something with that problem, or is it just simply buying
time? It's clear that the Title I funds cannot supplant the local funds. So that first 10 hours will have to be paid for by the state money. The schools could use Title I money to do more than the 10 hours, or they can use it for some other allowable costs of Title I. Bill Talbot took a look at some of the places that have invested a lot of Title I money in pre-K programs, and they have available to them more than enough Medicaid money to cover that, so they won't be left with no way to make up the difference.
It is a bridge. I mean, I think just to make sure everyone on the board understands, because I'm not sure everyone understands the way this works. When the law went through, it created an entitlement to 10 hours of pre-K in the state. So we have to fulfill the state obligation to pre-K before we can begin to access federal money to supplement that. And the title money is federal money. So everyone will have to provide the pre-K money first from the state ed fund. And then if they choose, they can use their title money to supplement that additional, to extend the day or provide additional services. We did have, as Bill pointed out, a substantial number of districts that are using Title I money currently to provide pre-K, and they will no longer be able to do that. So as they push in the state money, they have to find some other way to fill that gap. One of the things that we've been looking at is a way to bridge that by seeing what other resources might be available. And what we did see is that most SUs, in fact, I think everyone that is using Title I money have accumulated Medicaid rollover money that every year is sitting there, so that at least as much as they currently spend, that same amount up and above and beyond is currently sitting, waiting to be used. It's sort of a rainy day fund. And in some cases, particularly the two biggest cases that have come to our attention, they have almost two years worth, the equivalent of almost 2 years of Title I available, that they can begin to draw down to sort of cushion that bridge. It's not a long-term permanent solution, but I think the commitment is that as a state, we're going to provide pre-K. So eventually we need to pick it up. So really the challenge is how can we support districts from that fiscal shock in the transition, and we're looking at and beginning to meet with districts around the use of that Medicaid funding. Bill, was that?
Yes, that's got it exactly.
Okay. Karen, I was going to do full disclosure that Bill Talbot is here.
He is.
Thank you, Bill. You could have answered that question better than my attempt.
You did a great job.
You did a great job.
He said that you did a great job.
How many people don't have Medicaid money to put in there when the music stops playing?
We have not found any district that was using, we have a complete records of everyone who's using Title I for pre-K. We've run that against the Medicaid, and there isn't anyone who is, that we've seen, except for there are 1 or 2 districts that haven't reported to us based on fiscal year 14, which is another issue which not every district is accurate or timely in reporting to us. But based on what we have, there isn't a single district using Title I for pre-K that doesn't have Medicaid at this point. And I'd be happy to show you some of those numbers after the meeting.
Okay, if we got it covered and something else isn't pushed out on the way, then I'm okay.
What I'm saying is the balance that they have in every case that I've looked at at the SU level exceeds what they are spending at the SU level in Title I monies on pre-K. There may be still glitches. What we're completely committed to doing is working with the SUs one-on-one to work towards a solution. We understand that will create a challenge for some districts. The good news is that many districts actually were transitioning off Title I money in anticipation of this, so they're already out of that hole. And what we're going to do is just work with the ones that still have that problem and try to really work towards a solution. I think yours is another SU that's going to have some challenges, Shamri.
So, well, I'm not on the board anymore, but geographically where I live. So one of the things in terms of Medicaid, and I don't, maybe everybody around the table knows this, is the Medicaid funds from each of the individual districts comes back to the SU, and then the SU can spend it as they wish, not the individual districts, correct?
Well, the default provision of the law is it goes back to the districts in the same rate it was produced. So it's their money, but the SU board can decide a different method if they so choose. So it is up to the SU board, not a slam dunk, but it is an option. And they would still be getting their Medicaid grant next year, as they always have. They're sitting on an amount of money that they haven't used. And so this would be in addition to the grant they'll get. So if they're budgeted and used to using that money for a particular program or programs, they'll still have that. It's just their reserve. Ordinarily, when we give out grants, if they have money left at the end of the year, we ask them to give it back. In this program, we didn't, so they're holding on to it. And we're suggesting to them this would be a good use for it.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any other, do you have?
Yeah, it's not so much for Karen, so much as the shift means that the Title I money now, I'm starting to think about the Title I money, is then being used in other ways in those districts from the way it's currently been used. And is that going to things that eventually aren't sustainable, or new programming, or to fill the gap around summer school and after school, which would be great, but
Yeah, those are things, I mean, in theory,
what are the ramifications of?
Well, that could be a net win. I mean, it's both these revenues are all driven by poverty. They're both revenues that are supposed to benefit kids in poverty. So certainly they could turn around and use the Title I money that was freed up by preschool money to invest in after-school, extended year, or some other program.
So tracking how they'll have that data from Title I of what it's now going to be used for, because it wasn't used for preschool anymore. Or it will.
Right. The SUs submit a Title I plan in the spring.
It'll be in there. Thank you, Karen.
So they would have submitted it last spring, or the spring 2014 for this year?
They can make amendments if there are changes.
And I had a question earlier which had to do with poverty. So and Bill, I believe Bill answered it with a no, which is that the .46 allocation for 3- and 4-year-olds in poverty is not weighted.
And that's correct.
And Bill said that's correct.
Yeah, the poverty weighting is for kids ages 6 through 17, from families in the SNAP program, what we used to call food stamps.
And then the other answer that you gave me was in terms of the special ed, that's a block grant?
For pre-K kids, we give districts a EEE, Essential Early Education Block Grant, yes.
And that's based on grades K through 3?
We use grades 1, 2, and 3 to allocate it as a surrogate for ages 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you, Bill. Does anybody have any other questions of Karen?
Yeah, it may be a Bill Talbot question. The .46, unless there's an increase in the state appropriation to the education fund, that's still going to be a push in real cost out to the local districts. Even if you got the .46, by the time you subtract it down, unless you increase the appropriations, you're still cost shifting.
I think because every district will be adding kids, there'll be a general increase in spending, so that will be generalized in the state base tax rate for homestead property taxes. But on a district-by-district basis, they'll be counting more kids than they spend if they're getting new kids. Because it starts at .46, but it gets equalized, so it turns out to be about .42 when you're done. But that's .42 of their average per pupil spending. Let's say they're spending $10,000. Most will spend more than that per kid, so that's $4,200 a kid right there. So it's better than than what actually occurs. So it's actually a help on a district-by-district basis, and if it's only happening in 1 or 2 districts, they'd win, but because all districts have to do it, it's a general upward pressure on total spending, so that's got to be produced. It doesn't hit districts individually then, it hits the state generalized as a whole by raising up that 98 cents to maybe 98.5 cents. I don't know what the total will be in the end.
But it'd be it would reflect an increased state tax rate, right?
If it's anytime, yes, it could. Anytime education spending goes up, given that the grand list isn't growing, then you have to raise the rate.
That's what I thought you would say.
Like I said,
Karen,
yes,
that wasn't a question for you. Aren't you happy?
I'm glad that I didn't have to answer that one.
In the early years, in the first decade, we weren't raising rates, we were lowering rates because the grand list was growing. The base that those rates were applied to grew. People still paid more taxes, but it allowed you to lower rates. I mean, But anyway, the grant list is no longer growing. I don't know when it'll start growing again, but because of that, when you spend more money, you got to raise it to pay the bill. Got to have higher rates.
The short is this works out to a bit of an unfunded mandate on local on school spending.
But that's not for Karen.
No, it's funded. It's a state system.
Karen, that was not
to raise the
directed
money,
at
you
you.
got to pay the bill. You got to raise the money. That's all. You got to fund it. Which pocket do you want to pay it out of?
So Karen, I guess my closing comment would be that the memos and the various things that you're developing in transition, as state board members, we get the weekly updates that go out through AOE to the schools. Would this just be included in that we would get as that, and that's where we should look for it, or will you send it separately to us?
We will be sending them out in the field memo. If that works, that's fine. We'll be sending them out to others as well, so we could have Terry do a separate mail, emailing to you.
All right,
Whatever.
well, that would be fine. Then we know we got it. Would that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Karen. And I'm sure we'll have more questions for you if Stephen puts you on the agenda at a future date.
Yes, and I'll make sure that I look at the agenda.
Thanks,
Well, that's okay. This worked. I think it worked okay. Rebecca, would you like to say anything?
Thank you very much, Karen.
You're welcome.
Karen, I'm hanging up.
Okay, me too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Technology.
That worked pretty well.
That worked pretty well, I think.
That worked better than the...
You realize that more?
Next time, FaceTime on the screen,
And
and
you
we'll
gave,
see her.
you gave her an hour and a
wave.
half to her day.
I did for her travel. Well, that was...
We saved money for our budget.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did save money
Very
for my
efficient,
budget, because
yeah.
I'm sure she got a lot done.
Yes.
Well put.
Well, I appreciate everyone being patient with me, calling the wrong names,
did well.
etc. Stephen rarely does this. He must have been really important for him to have had to leave, because he does not like to do this. So please give him a good word for me. Because, so I do not believe we went over the June date just before the meeting.
We did?
So
What did we
we-
decide on? I missed
We
it.
decided on the 23rd, 24th, so that we have it in the book, because the current date is the 16th. Next month, we will be, can I announce where we are next month? That's fine, right?
You did already.
We're in Dillon's school district, correct? Way up there.
And I'm gonna miss it.
There's
And-
further space north of that.
A whole lot of
They're
space
gonna
further
go
north
2 years
than
in a
that.
row then.
2 years in a row for your last year, too. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. I think that was the last thing.
So moved.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to take a tour, 215, right in the back of the room.
Okay, great. All in favor?
You'd be out of school.
Mark moved to adjourn, and Bill seconded that. All in favor?
Aye.
It was unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job.